Watching UTV, it's Vote 22 and this is the special election edition. Now we're going to hear from Gareth Wilkinson, who's in Magherafelt. He's covering the constituencies of Foyle, Mid-Ulster and Upper Bann, where the Ulster Unionist leader Doug Beattie is fighting for his seat. Gareth.
Yes, Paul, and it would be no surprise if Doug Beattie had a very anxious, perhaps sleepless night. He is still in trouble here because after stage 5 in Upper Bann, he's actually not much more than 100 votes. Well, not much more than 100 votes separate him from the Young Alliance candidate Owen Tennyson. And let me reiterate that the leader of the UUP is actually behind Alliance at this moment. Now, this morning we had the DUP's Jonathan Buckley across the line in Upper Bann. His surplus is now currently being distributed, and the DUP's Diane Dodds, well, she'll be hoping that that will help her pull away from the danger zone. Now, it was John O'Dowd from Sinn Féin who topped the poll here, and Sinn Féin also have quite high hopes that they might be able to secure a second seat in this constituency through their candidate Liam Mackle. So it really is shaping up to be quite the dogfight for the 5th seat in Upper Bann, and as always, transfers are going to be key. Like I said, I'm also taking a look at Foyle this morning and who would call that one. The way it's boiling down, it seems like there are 4 candidates in the mix for 3 seats. Some very, very interesting battles are emerging, not least one within the SDLP, because their candidate Brian Tierney, former mayor in the city, of course, well, he is neck and neck with outgoing MLA Sinead McLaughlin. And what about that battle within unionism? The UUP's Ryan McCready is just ahead of the DUP's Gary Middleton, and I can tell you it is only a handful of votes that separate those two at the moment. That is an incredibly tense contest. Everything's being looked at, everything's being scrutinised, and nobody is going to call it. There's a bit of an air of anticipation here in the Count Centre here in Magherafelt, because we are actually awaiting the imminent arrival of the woman of the moment, Michelle O'Neill. She'll be making a victory speech shortly in Mid-Ulster, which we are expecting to be declared. There's going to be no change there, but of course we're all going to want to hear what Michelle O'Neill says in that victory speech.
Gareth Wilkinson, thank you very much indeed. So 51 of the 90 seats have been declared thus far. The emerging picture, as you see it, Tracy, is?
Well, I think at this moment in time, it's very hard to see how things are all going to shake out, because what you have now is, in some cases, like for instance in Upper Bann, you have 2 seats now being fought out between 3 candidates. What I'm hearing from Upper Bann is, people that I'm speaking to there, is because of the order of exclusions, the bounce of the ball has actually gone Doug Beattie's way. And as a result, he's likely to stay in. But here's what is interesting about that. What will keep him in will be unionist transfers. And as the DUP have pointed out to me, Doug Beattie was the one who said that he wouldn't say who his party would transfer to, and now the irony of ironies is he's now fighting for his political career dependent on other unionist transfers.
And that picture will emerge, obviously,
as we go on. I think also the Foyle picture is fascinating. We have the SDLP in a real dogfight, 2 candidates really fighting over 1 seat, and you would imagine that Sinead McLaughlin, the MLA, would have a higher profile and would have felt that she would have been the natural.
But Tierney is a former mayor.
He's a former mayor and he has a local presence, and his family have a long history in the SDLP, so it may be that what we talked about yesterday goes back to local politics, and I think many people would have said outside of Foyle wouldn't have expected him to do so well. And then of course there's Gary Middleton and Ryan McCready, the UUP slugging it out, and the DUP will be determined to keep that seat.
All politics is local, and particularly in Derry.
Particularly in Derry, yeah, and particularly between running mates, you know. So this is so. There's just 25 votes separating Sinead McLaughlin. Don't forget, Brian Tierney came ahead on first preferences, but Sinead McLaughlin has overtaken him slightly. She on
At one level, that's good vote management.
At one level, it is, and also I would imagine there's still a decent alliance elimination to happen. There's about 2,300 alliance votes. I would imagine on issue profile alone, they would favour Sinead McLaughlin over Brian Tierney, so that would help her. And also some of those later SDLP preferences, if Tierney goes out and elects Sinead McLaughlin, that could come down and help Ryan McCready bridge that 300-odd vote gap that he's just behind Gary Milton on. And again, that would see a sitting junior minister lose his seat.
And it's not an easy thing to read. Okay, so in Upper Ban, there's a second Sinn Féin candidate who did very well, but there's no transfers because the SDLP did so badly. If you go to somewhere like Strangford, there's a TUV and an Alliance candidates who are doing well. Conor Houston goes out, SDLP, that then helps Alliance. So actually, in some cases, the fights are really interesting because it depends, if you're a unionist, how many unionists have gone out, and if you're in the middle, it depends how many softy type people, soft political parties, soft unionists, soft nationalists have gone out.
This is why we have you here in the studio to.
It is a profession for anoraks. But don't forget, it's really interesting because what the transfers are showing is that Alliance surge and why they're holding in.
Well, we must also remember that there's the bigger picture emerging beyond this studio, and that's why we're going out and about today, because we're opening out to Jordanstown, and Eden Wilson can tell us about the Northampton a potential upset there for the DUP if Alliance takes a 5th seat. Eden.
Yes, Paul, a very slow count this morning. Still no one new over the line for Northampton. But indeed, I spoke to the DUP earlier and they say they're confident that the incumbent MLAs, Paul Frew and Mervyn Storey, can secure their 4th and 5th seats in Northampton. But speaking to the other parties, they say it's actually more of a tight squeeze than that. The Alliance Party candidate Patricia O'Lynn is hoping to squeak in to 5th place. That would be a huge upset for Northampton. Of course, DUP Heartland, it is their stomping ground. So we'll keep a very close eye on that one to see how the picture develops.
Very much indeed for that, Eden. Now we will discuss that very briefly in the studio before we move on. Tracy.
So we're back to this point that Pete's making. The point is that what you're trying to discern is really where are the voters' thoughts when they're putting through their transfers. If you are a soft unionist, do you go to Alliance? If you're an Alliance person going out, do you go to SALP, do you go to Ulster Unionist? It's very hard to know at this point where you're getting to the point where you're starting to look at 4, 5, 6 stage transfers. What were people thinking at that point? And so it is hard to read where things are going. I hear Alliance saying that Patricia O'Lynn is in with a chance, an outside chance, I would say. An outside chance. But the point is that she's in contention because we're trying to read the runes.
And it's the vagaries of the single transferable vote, isn't it? And we really are coming down to this issue of transfers. And when you look, for example, at the TUV and they're saying, look at the percentage share of the vote we have, it isn't going to translate into seats. And take the example of Strangford, where they had a very good showing. But when it comes to transfers, you have to ask yourself, where are those transfers going to come from the TUV? And that's the joy of this electoral system.
Well, we're going to go to Magherafelt now because waiting to talk to us is the MP for East Londonderry, Gregory Campbell. Mr. Campbell, thank you very much. You're the man on the ground at the moment. Can you tell us how Foyle is likely to finish?
I wish I could, Paul. It is going to be, I think, quite close. At the moment, Gary Middleton is about 440 votes ahead of Ryan McCready. A lot will depend on the transfers from 2 candidates. One is the Onto candidate and the other is the Alliance candidate. There's a further complication in that there's another former Onto candidate that would be in the same sort of anti-abortion, pro-life picture, who's being eliminated at the moment. We assume that most of her votes will transfer to Onto, who would hold quite a similar view, and the outgoing candidate was a former member of Onto. So we would assume most of those votes will end up in Onto's column, resulting in them having about 2,500 votes. So we don't know where they will transfer to, and of course we don't know where Alliance votes will transfer to. It really is all to play for on that last seat.
Let me ask you about the bigger picture that is emerging this Saturday morning. What's your view of that when you look at the Sinn Féin boost here, the drop in the vote to the DUP as well? What's your sense of what Northern Ireland is saying to the DUP?
Well, I think there's a state of flux. If you look at the Sinn Féin vote has risen, but only by 1%. Our vote has fallen by about 6%. mostly attributable to the TUV decision to stand candidates everywhere, which of course they're quite entitled to do. But I think it is the state of flux that Northern Ireland itself finds itself in. I mean, for example, if you look at the overall picture is of a Sinn Féin good election, and yet in Foyle their vote fell. The SDLPs fell there as well. Our vote fell in quite a few constituencies, although our seats appear to be holding up. I think the message is that we need stability and we need certainty. We'll not get either of those if Mary Lou MacDonald and Michelle O'Neill starts banging the drum for a unity poll.
And I hear what you're saying, indeed, but the unionist electorate will also be looking for certainty from the people that represent it. And I have to ask you this question. It's a simple, straightforward question. When will the party officers of the DUP meet to discuss what you will do next?
Well, we'll be meeting very early next week, and we'll take a decision as to how we move forward. But I think there's a message coming to us and to all the other unionist elected representatives and those who didn't get elected, that the unionist population has been divided, and most of those people out there are saying that has to end. There has to be a unified unionist approach to the future. How that pans out, how that will unfold is another matter. But there's a clear message coming to Jeffrey Donaldson, to Doug Beattie and to Jim Allister and to all of the rest of us. The unionists want to see a unified, stable approach to taking Northern Ireland forward.
All right, but we are where we are, and given the results, and we don't have the final results just yet, but given the direction of travel, if you were to park the protocol, would the DUP nominate for a Deputy First Minister?
Parking the protocol won't cut it. It needs to be resolved. It needs to be sorted. Remember, the problems that we have with the protocol have been mitigated because of all these grace periods.
So the
problems that we're seeing
okay,
now,
but let's put that to one side. Okay.
The problems
if the protocol is sorted,
of the iceberg.
If the protocol is sorted, would the DUP nominate for a Deputy First Minister?
Well, we'd have to take that decision, but I would have thought once the people have spoken, once the outstanding issues have been resolved, we would want to get down as quickly as possible to resolving the other problems, the health service, education and all of those issues.
So that's a yes then, you would nominate for the Deputy First Minister in that case?
Well, I said we would have to meet and discuss that because these things aren't always just black and white. I mean, when we talk about resolving the protocol, we would need to see what resolving it looks like. That's what we would need to see, discuss what that means.
A quick final question for you.
And then take a decision.
A quick final question for you. If the protocol is resolved, what would be your advice?
Well, if the protocol is resolved to our satisfaction, I would say let's get on. We've sorted that problem, let's get on with all the other problems and try and move Northern Ireland forward.
Gregory Campbell, thank you very much indeed.
In the Assembly.
Thank you very much indeed, Gregory Campbell, the MP for East Londonderry. Tracy.
Very interesting what Gregory Campbell has to say. I don't think it's any surprise that we're now starting to hear the DUP talk about unionist unity. I mean, the fact is that the unionist vote has been badly fractured. And questions will be asked generally within unionism, where do we go from here? The difficulty is, how do you get all these camps in under one umbrella? I mean, where does Jim Allister's vision of unionism fit with the TUV's Jim Allister?
And the other thing is too, it's not new to be talking about unionist unity. It's been fractured from forever almost.
Yeah, and I think in many ways what we know by now is unionist unity is a fallacy. It's a broad church. How on earth could they come together? Under what banner? Under what principles would they say they're standing in unity? But I do think there is a nuanced difference in what Gregory Campbell was saying, and I heard him saying this morning that they're looking now and saying we must accept the outcome of this election, and it seems like they will go to the executive, because what alternative do they have?
Nobody I know in the DUP ever said we're not going to be Deputy First Minister.
They never
really said they would be.
But but the point is, they what they were talking about was the protocol was the barrier.
Yes,
I'm sure there was somebody said that somewhere, but it wasn't. It was something that they really didn't say, but the media and the commentators picked up that they had said it.
But they didn't pour cold water on it.
No,
it became an issue, and actually that in itself galvanised.
Well, they've had a terrible.
And Gregory Campbell is ever the pragmatist.
No, Oh, absolutely. And look, I think the DP have nuanced. Paul Gibbon last night was nuancing his language. He didn't rule out Deputy First Minister, and being a former First Minister himself, I thought that was actually quite significant. But, the DP need to figure out where they go from here, because their seat count is going to flatter their actual vote in this election. They need to figure out.
We have plenty to talk about and lots of time in which to do it here on UTV, so do stay with us, team. We're going to take a short break now, but don't go away.